The deep blue waters of Kethari Prime sparkled under the twin suns, but the beauty hid a terrible truth. Far below the surface, in the coral cities that had stood for thousands of years, smoke and debris clouded the ancient halls. The Vorthak had come again, and this time they meant to finish what they started. Elder Nithara floated in what remained of the council chamber, her gill slits fluttering with exhaustion. Around her, the other surviving council members waited in silence. Their beautiful city of Coralthes was gone, reduced to rubble by Vorthak plasma bombardments. The population centers on 3 other ocean worlds had suffered the same fate. Of the 12 billion Kethari who had called these worlds home just 2 years ago, fewer than 50 million remained. "The fleet returns," announced warrior speaker Veltan, his voice carrying the weight of defeat. Through the chamber's great viewing wall they could see the Vorthak dreadnoughts descending through the atmosphere like black daggers. "They bring more troop ships. They mean to hunt down every last survivor." The elder's tentacles curled in despair. The Kethari were not warriors. They were builders, artists, singers of the deep currents. When the Vorthak Empire had first demanded tribute, they had paid it gladly, hoping to avoid conflict. When the demands grew larger, they had borrowed from other species to meet them. But the Vorthak hunger was endless. Tribute became slavery. Slavery became slaughter. "We cannot fight them," whispered council singer Mordai, her voice barely audible above the current generators. "Our defense fleet is destroyed. Our warriors are dead. We have nothing left but the evacuation ships." "Then we run," said another voice. "We scatter to the far reaches of the galaxy. Perhaps some of us will survive." Elder Nithara closed her large, dark eyes. She had lived for 3 centuries, had seen the rise of the great coral cities, had sung the deep songs that connected all Kethari across the stars. To watch her people become refugees, scattered and homeless, felt worse than death. "Wait," Veltan said suddenly. "There is one more option. We could send out a distress signal, ask the other species for help." A bitter laugh echoed through the chamber. "Help?" The Zelthani said they sympathized but could not risk war. The Mokari offered us a trade agreement instead of aid. The Quellian Council sent their prayers. No one will stand against the Vorthak Empire. They are too strong, too ruthless. "But we have not asked everyone," Veltan insisted. "What about the younger species? The ones still growing into the galaxy?" "Children like ourselves before the Vorthak came," Mordai said sadly. "What could they do that the great powers cannot?" Nithara felt something stir in her hearts. Hope was a dangerous thing when facing extinction, but she had to try. Send the message to every species in the galactic database. Not a request for military aid. Simply ask for help evacuating our civilians. Perhaps someone somewhere will have ships to spare. The communications array was damaged but still functional. Veltan's tentacles danced over the controls as he crafted the message. He kept it simple, translating it into every major galactic language. "This is Elder Nithara of the Kethari people. Our worlds are under attack by the Vorthak Empire. Our defenses have failed. Billions of our people are dead. We do not ask you to fight our battles. We ask only for help evacuating our remaining civilians before they are slaughtered. We have approximately 48 hours before the final assault begins. Any assistance would be remembered forever in the deep songs of our people. Coordinates attached." The message shot out through space at faster-than-light speeds, carried by quantum relays to every inhabited system within 1,000 light-years. Then they waited. The first responses came within hours. The Zelthani sent condolences and wished them well. The Hokari offered to accept 500 refugees if the Kethari could reach their space. The Vexhi suggested submitting to Vorthak. Rule might be preferable to extinction. Response after response came in, all saying essentially the same thing. They were sorry, but they could not help. 43 responses, Veltan reported as the hours passed. All negative. The Confederation of Worlds sent a formal protest to the Vorthak High Command. The trade union offered to purchase any artworks we wished to preserve for posterity. Nithara felt her hope dying. Perhaps this was how her people would end. not with the glory of battle, but with the indifference of a galaxy that would not risk itself for strangers. Then the 44th response arrived. "This is Admiral Sarah Chen of the Terran Defense Coalition." The message began in accented but clear galactic standard. "We have received your distress signal. We are not familiar with your species or your situation, but we understand you are facing extinction. That is unacceptable. Transmit the coordinates of all Vorthak forces in your system and any safe zones where your civilians are gathered. Help is coming. Terran ships will arrive in 36 hours. Hold on." The council chamber fell silent. None of them recognized the species name Terran or had heard of their defense coalition. "Who are they?" Mordai asked. Velton's tentacles flew over the database controls. "Searching. Here, Terrans, also called humans, carbon-based bipeds, from a system called Sol. They achieved faster-than-light travel only 173 years ago. No major wars in the database, no significant territory, classified as a developing species by the Galactic Survey." "Children," Elder Nithara murmured. "Younger than we were when the Vorthak first came to our worlds." "What ships do they have?" Velton queried the database further. "Military strength is unknown. The last survey was 50 years ago. At that time they possessed approximately 200 warp-capable vessels, mostly exploration and trade ships. A developing species with 200 ships against the Vorthak Empire. It should have been laughable. But something in Admiral Chen's voice had carried absolute certainty. Not bravado or false hope, but the calm confidence of someone who meant exactly what they said. "Send them our thanks," Nithara decided, "and transmit everything they requested. If these humans are brave enough to try, the least we can do is give them accurate information." As the data package shot toward human space, the Elder found herself humming one of the deep songs, an ancient melody about storms that came from unexpected directions. Perhaps the galaxy still held surprises. Perhaps somewhere among the stars, a young species had grown into something their databases had not recorded. Outside, the Coral City's remains, Vorthak patrols swept through the water hunting for survivors. The great dreadnoughts hung in orbit like dark moons preparing for the final extermination. But for the first time in months, Elder Nithara felt something other than despair. Help was coming. Even if she did not understand what form that help might take, someone had answered their plea. Someone had said the words the galaxy's great powers would not speak. That is unacceptable. In 36 hours, they would learn what it meant when humans decided to help. Admiral Sarah Chen stood in the command center of Luna Station, watching the largest military mobilization in human history unfold on the tactical displays around her. Ships that had been in dry dock for repairs were being rushed back into service. Cargo vessels were being fitted with military hardware. The entire Third Fleet had changed course from their patrol route near the Centauri colonies and was burning hard toward Kethari space. "Ma'am, we're getting reports from every sector command," her aide, Lieutenant Commander Jackson, said as he approached with a data tablet. "The First Fleet is departing from Mars orbit in 6 hours. The Second Fleet from Europa Station in 4 hours. Colonial Defense Forces from New Geneva, Kepler Station, and the Tau Ceti colonies are all en route." Chen nodded, still staring at the display. Red dots representing human ships were converging from across known space, all headed toward a small blue dot that marked the Kethari homeworld. "What about civilian support?" "More than we expected, Admiral. The shipping guilds are sending every transport they can spare. Medical ships from the Red Cross fleet launched 2 hours ago. Even some of the independent traders are volunteering." Captain Morrison from the freighter Lucky Strike said, and I quote, "Nobody commits genocide on my watch." A slight smile crossed Chen's face. That sounded like Morrison. She had served with him during the Proxima Station incident 15 years ago. He was exactly the kind of stubborn fool who would fly his cargo ship into a war zone if he thought it was the right thing to do. "What's our total strength looking like?" Jackson consulted his tablet. "As of now, we'll have approximately 460 combat vessels in the area of operations within 36 hours. Another 200 support ships. The numbers keep growing as more ships report in. 460 ships. Chen tried to remember the last time humanity had assembled such a fleet. The answer was never. Even during the territorial disputes, with the Rigel Consortium 20 years ago, they had never put more than 50 ships in one place. The door to the command center slid open, and Director Wei of the Terran Intelligence Service walked in. His usually calm expression showed signs of strain. "Admiral," he said without preamble, "we have a problem. Our intelligence network picked up Vorthak communications. They're aware of our mobilization." Chen turned to face him fully. "What's their response?" "They find it amusing." Wei's voice carried disgust. "Their high command intercepted our message to the Kethari. They're calling us upstart mammals and placing bets on how quickly their ships can destroy our fleet. Do we have any intelligence on their military strength?" Wei activated a holographic display. The image showed massive black warships bristling with weapons. "The Vorthak Empire has been conquering species for over 1,000 years. Their ships are larger than ours, more heavily armed, and they have centuries of combat experience. The force currently in Kethari space consists of approximately 100 ships, including 12 dreadnoughts." Jackson whistled low. 100 ships did all that damage to the Kethari. The Kethari were never a military species, Wei explained. They had perhaps 30 ships total, mostly patrol vessels and system defense platforms. The Vorthak have technology designed specifically for subjugating other species. They've done this hundreds of times before. Chen studied the tactical data. On paper, it looked impossible. The Vorthak ships outgunned anything in the human fleet. Their energy shields were more advanced. Their weapons had longer range. By every measure that mattered, humanity was walking into a slaughter. "There's more," Wei continued. "Long-range sensors show the Vorthak are bringing in reinforcements, not because they think they need them, but because they want to make an example of us. They're planning to broadcast our defeat across the galaxy to discourage anyone else from interfering with their operations." The command center fell quiet. Everyone present understood what that meant. This was not just about saving the Kethari anymore. This was about whether humanity would be allowed to exist as anything more than another conquered species. Chen looked around at the faces of her staff. She saw fear, yes, but also determination. These were people who had volunteered for military service because they believed in protecting others, not just other humans, but anyone who needed protection. "Director Wei, what's the status on our special projects?" Wei's expression shifted slightly. "The new weapon systems from the Titan research facility are still experimental. We've only tested them in simulations. The tactical AI systems from Mars Tech are functioning, but we don't know how they'll perform in actual combat. The adaptive armor plating is installed on less than half our ships. But they're ready for field testing?" "As ready as they'll ever be, Admiral. But I have to emphasize, these are untested technologies going up against battle-proven systems." Chen nodded slowly. Humanity's advantage had never been superior technology or overwhelming numbers. It had been adaptability, creativity, and the absolute refusal to quit when the odds were impossible. "What about psychological profiles on the Vorthak?" "Interesting question." Wei called up another display. "They're supremacists. They believe in their own superiority absolutely. They've never faced significant resistance because most species surrender once they realize they're outgunned. They don't understand species that keep fighting when victory seems impossible." "Good," Chen said quietly. "Let's keep it that way." Across human space, the mobilization continued. On Earth, factories that usually built civilian spacecraft were retooling to produce military drones. The asteroid mining stations in the belt were turning their industrial lasers into weapons. Every human colony with a shipyard was contributing whatever they could build in 36 hours. But perhaps most importantly, news of the Kethari situation had spread through human media. The images of the destroyed coral cities, the desperate plea for help, and the story of a peaceful species facing extinction had touched something deep in the human psyche. Recruitment offices on every world reported crowds of volunteers, not for conquest or glory, but for the simple purpose of helping. Strangers who had asked for help. On New Beijing Station, Captain Lisa Park reviewed the modifications being made to her heavy cruiser, Determination. Her chief engineer, a gruff veteran named Rodriguez, was installing weapon systems that had never been tested in combat. "Captain, I'm not sure these new plasma batteries will hold together under continuous fire," he reported. "The power coupling is experimental at best." "Do your best, Rodriguez. We launch in 4 hours whether they work or not." "Understood, ma'am. But can I ask you something? Why are we doing this? I mean, I'm all for helping people, but this looks like suicide. These Kethari aren't even allies. Most humans have never heard of them." Park looked out the viewport at the construction activity surrounding the station. Ships everywhere were being armed and refitted with desperate haste, because they asked for help, Rodriguez, and because if we don't help them, who will? Similar conversations were taking place throughout the fleet. Veterans explained to younger crew members that sometimes you had to fight not because you could win, but because not fighting was worse than losing. Engineers worked impossible hours to install untested equipment. Supply officers performed miracles to ensure every ship had ammunition, food, and medical supplies. In the deep reaches of space, Admiral Chen's flagship Unconquerable led the growing human fleet toward Kethari space. Behind them followed hundreds of ships, from massive battlecruisers to converted cargo vessels armed with mining lasers. It was not the most powerful fleet ever assembled, but it might have been the most determined. The Vorthak waited in Kethari space, confident in their superiority, amused by the approaching human fleet. They had faced desperate last stands before. Species always fought harder when facing extinction, but desperation was no substitute for superior technology and experience. What they did not understand was that humanity was not desperate. They were angry. And there was a significant difference between a species fighting to survive and a species fighting because someone had asked for help and meant to get it. Fleet Commander Vexthul of the Vorthak Empire stood on the bridge of his flagship, Endless Conquest, watching the strange readings on his sensors with growing amusement. The human fleet had arrived exactly when their Admiral Chen had promised, dropping out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Kethari system in a formation that defied all conventional military doctrine. "Report," he commanded, his forearms crossed behind his back in the traditional pose of Vorthak authority. "Sir, we count 473 human vessels," his sensor officer replied, mandibles clicking in what passed for Vorthak laughter. "Most appear to be civilian ships with military modifications. Their formation is chaotic." Vexthul looked at the tactical display. Where a proper military fleet would arrange itself in ordered battle lines, the human ships spread out like a swarm of insects. Small fighters mixed with massive battleships. Cargo vessels flew alongside warships. There was no clear command structure, no recognizable battle formation. "Primitive," he said dismissively. "They fight like the wild animals they evolved from. No discipline, no strategy. Sir, we're receiving a transmission from the lead human vessel. Put it through." The holographic display shimmered and resolved into the image of Admiral Sarah. General Vexthul studied her with professional interest. She appeared calm, which surprised him. Most species showed fear when facing Vorthak warships for the first time. "This is Admiral Chen of the Terran Defense Coalition," she said without preamble. "You will cease all hostile actions against the Kethari people and withdraw from their space immediately." Vexthul's mandibles clacked in genuine amusement. "I am Fleet Commander Vexthul of the Eternal Empire. You are in violation of Imperial law by interfering with a subjugation operation. Surrender your ships and submit to Imperial authority, and I will grant you swift deaths." Chen's expression didn't change. "I'll take that as a no. All human ships weapons free. Begin attack pattern Omega." The transmission ended. Vexthul stared at the empty display for a moment, then broke into harsh laughter. "Attack pattern Omega? What kind of military uses letters for tactical designations, no matter? All ships, standard battle formation. We will destroy half their fleet in the first salvo and accept the surrender of the remainder." The Vorthak fleet moved with practiced precision. 12 massive dreadnoughts formed the center line, their primary weapons charging. Smaller cruisers took flanking positions while destroyers moved to envelope the enemy formation. It was a maneuver they had used hundreds of times against dozens of species. The human response was unlike anything in Vexthul's experience. Instead of moving into a counter formation, the human ships exploded outward like fragments from a grenade. Small fighters accelerated far faster than their specifications suggested possible, weaving through space in patterns that seemed random, but somehow avoided every targeting lock. Larger ships began broadcasting on multiple frequencies simultaneously, filling the communication spectrum with chatter, music, and what sounded like poetry reading. "Sir, our targeting systems are having difficulty acquiring locks. His weapons," officer reported. "The interference is unusual." Before Vexthul could respond, the first wave of human fighters reached his destroyer screen. He expected them to engage with energy weapons at maximum range, following standard space combat doctrine. Instead, they did something that made his sensor officer cry out in alarm. They rammed. Not one or two fighters in desperate suicide attacks, but dozens of them, all at once. Small human ships slammed into Vorthak destroyers at nearly light speed. Their hulls converted into kinetic projectiles that punched through shields and armor alike. The explosions lit up the space between the fleets like a string of stars being born. "Impossible," Vexthul breathed. "No species fights like this. No commanders sacrifice their ships so casually." But the ramming attacks were just the beginning. As the human fighters died, their larger ships moved forward. Instead of the measured energy weapon exchanges that characterized civilized warfare, they launched clouds of what appeared to be simple kinetic projectiles. Chunks of metal, asteroid fragments, even what looked like construction materials. "Sir, those projectiles are accelerating beyond initial velocity," his science officer reported with something approaching panic. "They appear to be powered, and, sir, there are thousands of them." The cloud of debris reached the Vorthak battle line like a metal storm. Most of it was intercepted by point defense systems, but there was simply too much of it. Hundreds of small impacts peppered the Vorthak ships. Individually, they did little damage, but together they began to overwhelm shield systems never designed to handle such volume. Then the human heavy ships opened fire. Vexthul had studied the technical specifications of human weapons from their intelligence reports. Primitive plasma cannons, basic energy shields, nothing that should threaten advanced Vorthak technology. What he saw defied those reports. The human battleship Determination fired what looked like a standard plasma beam, but as it traveled through space, the beam somehow intensified rather than dispersing. By the time it struck the Vorthak cruiser, Iron Will, it had somehow become 3 times more powerful than it should have been. "How are they doing that?" Vexthul demanded. "Unknown, sir. Their weapon signatures don't match our intelligence data. It's as if they've completely redesigned their technology in the past few months." More human ships engaged, and each one seemed to have weapons that behaved differently than expected. Some fired beams that split into multiple projectiles mid-flight. Others launched what appeared to be missiles that suddenly accelerated far beyond their supposed capabilities. One ship seemed to be firing concentrated bursts of stellar radiation that shouldn't have been possible to generate or contain. But the most disturbing thing was the human tactical behavior. They ignored every rule of space combat. Ships that should have retreated when damaged instead accelerated toward enemy vessels. Crews that should have surrendered when their shields failed instead started using their ships as battering rams. The heavy cruiser, Defiant, took a direct hit from a Vorthak dreadnought's main gun. Its shields collapsed, its hull was breached. In a dozen places, an atmosphere vented into space. By all military logic, the ship was dead. Instead, it somehow managed one final acceleration burn and crashed directly into the dreadnought's bridge section. Both ships disappeared in a ball of nuclear fire. "Sir," his communications officer reported with poorly concealed fear, "we're receiving damage reports from across the fleet. 7 destroyers destroyed, 3 cruisers heavily damaged, and the dreadnought Eternal Glory is gone." Vexthul stared at the tactical display in growing disbelief. His fleet was being torn apart by an enemy that fought like madmen. No, not madmen. like something far more dangerous. The humans fought like people who considered death an acceptable price for victory. "Sir, the human admiral is hailing us again." Chen's image appeared on the display. Her ship had taken visible damage, scorch marks across the hull, missing weapon batteries, but she still appeared calm. "Commander Vexthul," she said conversationally, "you have approximately 40 ships left. We have 327. I'm going to give you one more chance to withdraw. You fight like animals," Vexthul snarled. "No honor, no discipline. Victory gained through suicide attacks means nothing." "We don't fight for honor," Chen replied simply. "We fight to win, and we fight to protect people who asked for our help. Your choice, Commander. Leave now, or we finish this." Vexthul looked at his tactical display. The human fleet had reformed into new positions, and now he could see the pattern behind their apparent chaos. Every move had been calculated to maximize damage while minimizing their own losses. They had sacrificed ships and crews, yes, but only when it served a larger tactical purpose. These weren't animals or madmen. They were strategists who treated war as a problem to be solved, rather than a ritual to be observed. "All ships," he commanded quietly. "Emergency withdrawal. Set course for the rally point at maximum speed." As the Vorthak fleet fled the system, Admiral Chen allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. The first battle was won, but she knew this was only the beginning. The Vorthak would be back with a larger fleet and better intelligence. The difference was that now they knew what humanity was capable of when someone asked for help. They just didn't yet understand that what they had seen was humans being careful, not to cause unnecessary destruction. When the Vorthak returned with their full strength, they would learn what happened when humanity decided to stop holding back. High Admiral Krevnash of the Vorthak Empire stood before the assembled War Council in the massive chamber aboard the Imperial flagship Absolute Dominion. The holographic display showed the tactical analysis of the defeat at HFY Prime, and the silence in the room was as cold as deep space. "Explain to me," he said slowly, his voice carrying the authority of 1,000 conquered worlds, "how a primitive species with inferior technology destroyed 1/3 of Fleet Commander Vexthul's force." The intelligence officers shifted nervously. None of them wanted to be the first to speak because the High Admiral had a reputation for executing messengers who brought unpleasant news. "Sir," one finally ventured, "our analysis suggests the humans have been deliberately concealing their true military capabilities. Their weapons technology appears to have advanced significantly beyond our intelligence estimates." "Advanced how quickly? Technologies do not leap forward by decades in mere months." That's exactly what appears to have happened, sir. Our captured sensor data shows weapons that shouldn't be possible with their industrial base. Power outputs that exceed their energy generation capacity. Materials that are stronger than anything we've encountered." Krevnash studied the data with growing fury. The Vorthak Empire had ruled through technological superiority for a millennium. They conquered species by demonstrating that resistance was futile, that Vorthak weapons and tactics were simply too advanced to overcome. The idea that a species barely 2 centuries into spaceflight could match their military technology was not just impossible, it was insulting. "How many ships do they have in total?" "Unknown, sir. Our intelligence network has been monitoring their communications, but they use encryption methods we haven't been able to break. Conservative estimates suggest they can field between 800 and 1,000 combat vessels. Then we will bring 2,000. Krevnash's mandibles clicked with satisfaction. "Assemble the Grand Armada, every available ship from the conquest fleets. We will not merely defeat these humans, we will obliterate them so thoroughly that their homeworld will serve as a monument to the folly of defying the Empire." The Grand Armada that assembled in Vorthak space over the following weeks was the largest military force the Empire had ever deployed. 2,000 warships ranging from fast attack cruisers to massive dreadnoughts capable of cracking planets. Support vessels carried enough supplies for a prolonged campaign. Troop transports held entire armies ready to occupy human space once their fleets were destroyed. It was a force that had never known defeat. While the Vorthak prepared their overwhelming response, humanity was making preparations of its own. The victory at HFY Prime had bought them time, but Admiral Chen knew it would not be long before the Empire brought everything they had. "Report on Operation Deep Strike," she commanded from her new headquarters on the liberated Kethari homeworld. Captain Rodriguez, recently promoted to head of Special Operations, activated a series of tactical displays. "Phase 1 is complete, Admiral. We've identified 17 major Vorthak supply depots, 43 communication relay stations, and 12 fleet anchorages along their supply lines. Phase 2 begins in 6 hours. Chen nodded. The humans had spent the week since their victory not just preparing for the next battle, but studying how the Vorthak Empire actually functioned. They had discovered something interesting. For all their technological superiority, the Empire was surprisingly vulnerable to the kind of warfare humans excelled at. What about the new production facilities? Online and exceeding projections. The automated shipyards at Titan are producing 1 destroyer every 18 hours. The weapons foundries throughout the Sol system are operating at maximum capacity. Most importantly, the new AI-assisted tactical systems are ready for deployment, and our allies? Rodriguez smiled grimly. That's the most interesting development. After word of our victory spread, we've received contact from 47 species requesting mutual defense agreements. Not military alliances, they're too afraid of the Vorthak for that, but intelligence sharing, supply agreements, and safe harbor for our ships. The galaxy is watching, Admiral. They want to see if we can do it again. The answer came when the Grand Armada arrived at the edge of human space 3 weeks later. High Admiral Krevenash expected to find a defensive fleet waiting for him, probably arranged around Earth or one of the other major human worlds. Instead, his sensors showed nothing. "Where are they?" he demanded. "Sir, we're detecting no major human fleet concentrations in the Sol system or any of the outer colonies. Long-range sensors show normal civilian traffic, but no military formations. They're hiding," Krevenash decided. "Probably hoping we'll spread our forces searching for them, then attack when we're dispersed. Standard guerrilla tactics." "Very well. We proceed to Earth directly. When we begin bombarding their homeworld, they'll come to defend it." The Grand Armada moved deeper into human space in perfect formation, 2,000 ships advancing like an unstoppable tide. They swept aside the few human patrol vessels they encountered, noting with satisfaction that these ships fled rather than fighting hopeless battles. But as they progressed deeper into human territory, strange things began to happen. Supply convoys started disappearing, not destroyed in battle, simply vanishing without distress calls or debris fields. Communication relays went silent. Fuel depot stations stopped responding to contact attempts. The Vorthak dismissed these as minor inconveniences at first, but the pattern accelerated. "Sir," the logistics coordinator reported with growing concern, "we've lost contact with 7 supply bases in the past 48 hours. The fuel convoy from Sector 7 is 6 hours overdue. Send a patrol to investigate." The patrol ship Swift Death jumped to the coordinates of the missing convoy and found only empty space. No wreckage, no energy signatures, nothing to indicate what had happened. But as the patrol ship turned to leave, something impossible happened. Space itself seemed to come alive around them. What they had taken for asteroid debris suddenly revealed itself as camouflaged human ships. Not individual vessels, but entire fleets that had been hiding in plain sight using some kind of advanced stealth technology. The patrol ship's final transmission was cut short as dozens of human vessels opened fire simultaneously. Similar attacks were happening throughout Vorthak space. Human ships appeared from nowhere, struck with devastating precision, and vanished before reinforcements could arrive. Supply lines that had functioned reliably for centuries were being systematically destroyed by an enemy that seemed to be everywhere and nowhere. "How are they doing this?" Krevenash raged as the reports continued to pour in. "Our sensors should detect any ship larger than a fighter craft." "Sir, intelligence analysis suggests they're using some form of adaptive camouflage combined with artificial intelligence coordination. Their ships can mimic asteroid fields, space debris, even empty space itself. They appear to be using our own sensor expectations against us, but the stealth attacks were only part of the human strategy." As the Grand Armada pushed deeper into human space, they found themselves facing something even more disturbing: weapons that seemed to learn and adapt during combat. The first indication came when a Vorthak destroyer engaged a human cruiser in what should have been a routine skirmish. The Vorthak ship fired its standard plasma batteries, expecting to overwhelm the smaller vessel quickly. Instead, the human ship's shields not only absorbed the attack, but seemed to become stronger with each successive hit. "Impossible," the destroyer, Captain reported. "Their shield strength is increasing. The more we shoot at them, the more resistant they become." Then the human ship returned fire with weapons that behaved unlike anything in the Vorthak database. The energy beam seemed to analyze the target's defensive systems in real time, adjusting their frequency and power output to find weaknesses. By the fourth shot, they were penetrating Vorthak shields as if they weren't there. Similar reports came in from across the battle zone. Human ships that adapted their tactics within minutes of encountering new Vorthak weapons. AI systems that analyzed enemy movements and predicted their next actions. Weapons that literally evolved during combat to become more effective against whatever they were fighting. "Sir," the fleet's chief scientist reported with something approaching terror, "these humans appear to have militarized artificial intelligence in ways we never considered. Their ships aren't just following pre-programmed tactics. They're learning, adapting, improving with every engagement." High Admiral Krevnash stared at the tactical displays as red warning icons multiplied across his fleet status. Supply lines cut. Communication networks disrupted. Individual ships being picked off by an enemy that struck from the shadows and vanished before retaliation was possible. For the first time in his long military career, he was facing an enemy that fought wars the way he had never imagined, not through superior firepower or defensive positions, but through adaptation, innovation, and the systematic destruction of everything that made his massive fleet possible. "All ships," he commanded through gritted mandibles. "Maximum acceleration. To Earth. We end this now, before they can do any more damage." What High Admiral Krevnash did not understand was that the humans had. High Admiral Krevnash expected to find Earth defended by massive orbital platforms, minefields, and the entire remaining human fleet arranged in desperate defensive formations. Instead, as the battered remains of his Grand Armada dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Sol system, he found something that chilled him to his core. Nothing. No defenses. No fleet formations. No obvious military preparations. Earth hung in space like a blue-green jewel, apparently unprotected, with normal civilian traffic moving between the planets as if no war was taking place. "Sir," his sensor officer reported, nervously, "we're detecting normal shipping patterns, orbital habitats, asteroid mining operations. No significant military presence." "It's a trap," Krevnash said immediately. "They're hiding again, waiting for us to commit to an attack so they can strike from ambush." But as hours passed with no sign of human military forces, he began to wonder if perhaps the humans had simply given up. His fleet had been reduced from 2,000 ships to fewer than 800 during the running battle through human space. But 800 Vorthak warships were still more than enough to sterilize a planet. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission from Earth." The holographic display activated, showing Admiral Sarah Chen standing in what appeared to be a simple office rather than a military command center. Behind her, through a large window, Krevnash could see the curved horizon of Earth itself. "Hi, Admiral Krevnash," she said calmly. "Welcome to the Sol system. I trust your journey through our space has been educational." "Surrender, human," Krevnash snarled. "Your tricks and ambush tactics have cost me ships, but you cannot hide forever. I have enough firepower remaining to turn your homeworld into molten rock." Chen's expression didn't change. "I'm sure you do. But before you begin bombarding civilian targets, I wanted to give you one final opportunity to withdraw your forces and return to Vorthak space. You dare offer me terms? My fleet surrounds your homeworld." "Your fleet," Chen said quietly, "is exactly where we wanted it to be." Something in her tone made Krevnash look more carefully at his tactical displays. His ships were spread throughout the Sol system, positioned to bombard Earth from multiple angles. It was a perfect attack formation, one that no planetary defense could counter. It was also a formation that left his ships isolated and vulnerable. "All ships," he commanded quickly. "Close formation and..." The stars around his fleet suddenly came alive. What his sensors had registered as asteroids, space debris, and background radiation revealed themselves as human ships. Not hundreds of them, but thousands. The entire Sol system had been turned into a trap, with concealed vessels hiding behind every moon, asteroid, and orbital platform. But these were not the ships his intelligence had prepared him for. These vessels were larger, more heavily armed, and equipped with weapons that defied everything the Vorthak thought they knew about human technology. Energy beams that bent space itself, projectile weapons that fired miniature black holes, shield systems that seemed to draw power from the vacuum of space itself. Impossible, Krevnash breathed as the readings poured in. These technologies, they're theoretical concepts, not practical weapons. Admiral, his science officer called, out in panic. The humans appear to have developed applied physics beyond anything in our databases. These weapons shouldn't be able to exist. The human fleet moved with perfect coordination, every ship acting as part of a single vast intelligence. They didn't attack randomly or charge into battle. They executed a maneuver so complex and precisely timed that it could only have been calculated by artificial intelligences working together at light speed. The Vorthak fleet found itself trapped in a sphere of human ships that contracted inward like a closing fist. Every direction they turned led to more enemy vessels. Every attempt to break out was anticipated and countered. Within minutes, the Grand Armada was completely surrounded and outgunned by a factor of 5 to 1. "This is Admiral Chen," came the transmission on all frequencies. "Vorthak ships, you are ordered to power down your weapons and prepare to be boarded. Any ship that attempts to attack human vessels or Earth will be destroyed immediately." Krevnash's mandibles clicked in desperate fury. "All ships, emergency dispersal pattern 7. Target their command ships and—" His orders were cut short as the human ships opened fire. But instead of the chaotic barrage he expected, what followed was a demonstration of precision that bordered on art. Each Vorthak vessel was targeted by exactly the number of human ships necessary to disable it, without destruction. Weapons were surgically removed. Engines were precisely overloaded. Shield generators were shut down with targeted electromagnetic pulses. In less than 10 minutes, the entire Grand Armada was dead in space, powerless and defenseless. "How?" Krevnash whispered, staring at his dead control panels. "How did you develop such technology so quickly?" Chen's image appeared on his emergency display. "Because you gave us a reason to. When you threatened the Kethari, you made them our protected species. When you declared war on us, you gave us permission to stop holding back." "Holding back? That was you holding back?" "High Admiral, humanity has been spacefaring for less than 2 centuries, but we've been fighting wars for our entire history. We know things about conflict that you've never had to learn, because you've always had superior technology to rely on. We learned how to win when we were outgunned, outmanned, and outmatched." Boarding pods began attaching to Vorthak ships throughout the system, but instead of the brutal assault troops Krevnash expected, the humans who came aboard his flagship were calm, professional, and surprisingly courteous. They secured his weapons and command systems, but they also brought medical supplies for his wounded crew. "I don't understand," he said to the human officer who accepted his surrender. "We came here to destroy you. Why are you treating our wounded?" Captain Rodriguez, now bearing the insignia of the Terran Occupation Forces, looked at him with something that might have been pity. "Because we're not you, Admiral. We fight wars to protect people, not to prove we're superior." Over the following days, as human ships escorted the captured Vorthak fleet back toward their home space, Krevnash began to understand what had happened. The humans hadn't just defeated the Grand Armada. They had orchestrated its defeat from the moment it left Vorthak space. Every attack on their supply lines, every ambush, every seemingly random encounter had been part of a larger strategy to weaken and isolate his forces. "Your entire war effort," Admiral Chen explained during one of their conversations, "was based on the assumption that you were fighting a conventional species with conventional technology. But we're not conventional. We adapt. When you showed us your weapons, we built better ones. When you demonstrated your tactics, we developed counters. When you brought your largest fleet, We made sure it was exactly where we wanted it to be. But the technology gap, Krevnash protested. Our weapons, our shields, our ships, they've been refined over centuries of conquest. And that was your weakness, Chen replied. You stopped innovating because you didn't need to. We never stopped, because we always faced enemies that were stronger than us. The Vorthak Empire conquered through technological superiority. Humanity learned to win through technological adaptation. The final humiliation came when they reached the Vorthak homeworld, instead of the orbital bombardment that would have followed. A traditional conquest, the human fleet simply positioned itself in orbit and waited. Admiral Chen's terms were broadcast to the planetary government. Complete demilitarization of all Vorthak forces. Reparations to every species the Empire had conquered or enslaved. Permanent monitoring stations throughout Vorthak space to ensure compliance. And most importantly, the immediate release of all subject species and the return of all occupied territories. This is unacceptable, the Vorthak High Command transmitted back. The Empire will never submit to such terms. Chen's response was simple. Then you will have no empire to submit with. The demonstration that followed was brief and surgical. Human ships disabled every military installation, every weapons factory, every shipyard in the Vorthak system, without causing unnecessary casualties. In 6 hours, a civilization that had ruled through force for 1,000 years was rendered incapable of threatening anyone. 3 months later, Elder Nithara of the Kethari swam through the restored coral gardens of her homeworld, watching human engineers work alongside her people to rebuild their cities. The humans had not just driven off the Vorthak, they had stayed to help repair the damage. Why? She asked Admiral Chen during one of the human leaders' visits. You could have left once the Vorthak were defeated. Why remain to help us rebuild? Chen smiled, watching a group of human children playing with young Kethari in the shallows. Because helping you was never about defeating the Vorthak, Elder. It was about making sure you got the help you asked for. The war was just something that got in the way of that. Across the galaxy, other species watched the news reports with amazement. The humans had not only defeated the seemingly invincible Vorthak Empire, but had done so while acting as protectors rather than conquerors. Human ships now patrolled trade routes, ensuring safe passage for peaceful species. Human colonies welcomed refugees from